I'm one of those few privileged people who whatever he asked from the Almighty, he got it. And this is my last wish that, if I can bring rule of law in Pakistan and raise our people out of poverty on the lines what China has done, I would be able to meet my maker with confidence.
Well, best of luck, I'm sure.
Our purpose is not that we become part of any bloc. Listen, I would love to debate with Narendra Modi on TV.
Do you think Russia and Pakistan have reached that point when they can deal with one another as self-sufficient actors on a bilateral basis rather than, let's say, looking onto others?
Well, let me just go back in history. When the Cold War was, ravaging the whole of the world was divided into blocs. Pakistan moved in with the United States. We became part of the bloc in the Cold War with the US. India actually stayed neutral, but it was very close to the Soviets. Now when I look back, I think initially Pakistan needed help because when we became independent, we were impoverished. There were millions of refugees in Pakistan, we needed help. But, beyond 10 years or so, we should have then been non-aligned, independent country, stood on our own feet, not relied on aid. We became part of a bloc because we got foreign aid. When you look back, foreign aid is a curse for a country because you do not fix your own systems, you do not raise your own revenues, you don't increase your exports, you rely on handouts, and it stops a country evolving and developing and becoming self-reliant. So the world being divided into Cold War blocs and Pakistan becoming part of a bloc, when you look back, it stopped us from developing as a country.
Well, you cannot go back, but you can change things moving forward. So do you think at this point?
So when you learn from history, you learn from your mistakes.
You have to know how to take the knocks. I guess that's your motto in life, right?
You cannot move forward in life until you learn from your mistakes. So now what we want to do is not become part of any bloc. We want to have trading relationships with all countries. We have suffered. India became a hostile country, so the trade between them was minimal. Iran had sanctions, so we couldn't trade on the west side. Afghanistan has 40 years of conflict, so we couldn't go north and then to Central Asia. And we couldn't go to Central Asia because we became part of the US bloc and Central Asia was part of the Soviet bloc. So what we want now is trade with everyone. And what is the purpose behind it? To raise our people out of poverty. That is the main, any head of state, his main focus should be how do you raise people out of poverty. And the best way is trading with everyone. And trading, regions develop. Now our region has been left behind because sadly there's hardly any trading with the neighbors.
But Prime Minister, intention to trade is perhaps not enough because as you know our countries for quite some time have been discussing a large infrastructure project. I think it's called the Pakistan Stream, a gas pipeline. But forgive me my pun, the stream hasn't gotten enough steam yet, and now in addition to logistical financing challenges, we are also dealing, Moscow is dealing with the threat of arbitrary sanctions, Western sanctions, that could be imposed on any Russia-associated project. Do you think this project and others will be up and running in our lifetime? Because sure, you are free, technically speaking, you are free to trade with everyone, but you know how geopolitics works, and there are some subtle ways of imposing pressure on international partners.
That's true. This North-South pipeline, one of the reasons it suffered was the companies that we were negotiating with turned out that the US had applied sanctions on them. So the problem was to get a company that wasn't sanctioned, a Russian company that wasn't sanctioned. So that became a problem. With Iran, we are gas deficient right now. We could just gas pipeline from Iran, but Iran is sanctioned. I have to say that the developing world really wishes that there is not another Cold War, because how do we go ahead? Our purpose is not that we become part of any bloc. My main purpose is, we have almost half our population, the bottom 50%, half is above poverty line and half is below. But if there's like this commodity super cycle when commodity prices have gone up, or if there's a shock like the COVID-19, then they start going below the poverty line. So the last thing we want is the world divided into blocs, sanctions, and I'm hoping that this Ukraine crisis is resolved peacefully.
Mm-hmm. But do you think this pipeline will be up and running while
well,
you're still in office?
we have been working on it with the Russian counterparts, and I think we have got very close now to signing the agreement.
Good luck with that. You mentioned the Ukrainian crisis, and if we read reports in Western media, there's an imminent war between Russia and Ukraine on the cards, and clearly Western countries take a very oppositional, I would even say inimical view to Russia. For a shrewd politician like yourself, don't you think that it's perhaps too precarious of a time to expand Pakistan's geopolitical horizons?
Well, firstly, this doesn't concern us. I mean, we have a bilateral relationship with Russia. We really want to strengthen it. As I said, regions develop. It's not countries don't develop in isolation. It's because a whole region goes up. Like we saw the European Union. I mean, I was in university in England when the European Union came into being, and then the whole area standard of living went up. So we want to sort of really, we hope that, sanctions are lifted on Iran so that, we're short of gas here. And, with Iran, it's the cheapest gas we can get. And similarly, we hope that India one day, I mean, Indian leadership, I wish they would concentrate on raising people out of poverty in India rather than proving to the world that the Hindus are the most superior race. I mean, their leadership, how can a leadership not worry about having the highest poverty in the world is in the Indian subcontinent? How could they not worry about it rather than trying to prove to the world that the Hindus are superior?
Well, but Prime Minister, on the other hand, many nations go through such period. I mean, it could be more or less painful historically, but the spell of nationalism has affected many countries historically. Now, you mentioned that you don't want to play camp politics anymore. You want to be a bridge. And this is a very admirable goal, also a very beautiful metaphor. I think Turkey or even Ukraine framed their foreign policy in such terms a few years back, but they were disappointed. What makes you believe that Pakistan can actually pull it off, being this bridge, let's say in Eurasia, when so many other countries attempted it and failed?
Well, firstly, let me just say one thing. As a student of history, I do not believe that military conflicts solve problems. I believe they give rise to so many other problems. You go in to solve one problem. Supposedly the US went into Iraq to fight Al-Qaeda, but in the end ISIS came into being. If you look back, I mean, look at the conflict since 9/11. I mean, if a third party dispassionately did a proper analysis of so many people killed, what was achieved at the end? What happened in Afghanistan? 20 years of, God knows, hundreds and thousands of people dying. What was the achievement? So therefore, I'm not a believer in military conflicts. I believe the civilized societies resolve the difference through dialogue. And the countries that rely on military conflict have not studied history properly.
Well, they have not studied history properly, and they haven't faced any accountability, because in this day and age, power still, decides what has to be done. Do you believe, on a personal, or let's say on a political level, in some sense of accountability, maybe historical accountability, do you think things will change in the world so that all the great aspirations that you have could be realized without us getting very cynical? Because I hear what you're saying on an emotional level, but I have covered so many wars and I have seen so many people killed absolutely for nothing that I simply don't believe that Western leaders care about things like human lives or even development in the developing countries. I'm sorry for saying that.
It's true. Most leaders, their main concern is to stay in power. So if to stay in power, there's what they call as a good war, they won't mind loss of few human lives as long as
collateral damage. It's not people. It's collateral
exactly.
damage.
I mean, as someone who looks upon the world from a spiritual point of view, I think it is insane to have a conflict with the idea of people dying and thinking that you will get more popular because of that. I think throughout history, human beings have done this. Supposedly great leaders came in and caused death and destruction. So I believe, for instance, take this Ukraine conflict. I mean, for the life of mine, I cannot really believe that there is any chance, there's any possibility of a conflict, because the consequences, forget about what will happen to the combatants. For the developing world, already the price of oil has gone up because of the prospect of a conflict. Ukraine supplies wheat to the world, and for that matter, Russia. Now imagine what will happen. Already the world is suffering from the after effects of the COVID-19. Imagine if there's a conflict. What will happen to the poor countries? Already the poor countries are suffering. They are already in debt because they had to incur debt because of the consequences of the COVID-19 fallout. So I cannot in my mind understand how can they even have got this close to a conflict? I can't understand this.
We're talking about the Ukrainian conflict, and obviously we, the Russians and our Ukrainian neighbors, are very affected, but you have your own conflict to solve, and it may be a very stupid question on my part, but because we all know that, bad peace is better than a good war, but still, historically, do you think it's better to leave a conflict in a limbo for decades on end, or do you think issues should be solved when they're hot?
You see, if humans want, they can solve any conflict. The problem is that the humans, the leaders, and I'm talking about the leaders, I'm sure people in Ukraine and in Russia, everyone understands that if there's a conflict, there will be consequences. Everyone will be worse.
It's not about the people. People on either side don't want this conflict to happen.
So exactly. But I think that the leadership in the countries is then stuck that if we withdraw from this position, what will be the consequences to us politically? Because politically there are consequences always. And I think it takes very powerful, great leaders who rise above this and who think about the effects on the human beings.
I do want to ask you about great leadership, but very quickly, I know that you have tried to deal with your mutual grievances with India over Kashmir, and I'm sure you're not satisfied with the results of those efforts. Are you going to leave that issue to your successors, or are you still hoping to try something new?
Do you know, when my party came into power in 2018, first thing I did was to reach out to India. And I told them, our only issue is Kashmir. Let's sit down on the table and resolve it. Let's have a roadmap. But I didn't realize, and remember, I'm the one who knows India better than anyone because cricket is a passion, in the subcontinent. And because of, me being captain of cricket here and sort of playing over 10 years against India, I know India better than most people. I know the senior journalists, their politicians, their sports people. So I know India very well. So I immediately reached out. But then I discovered, to my horror, that this is not the India I used to know, because it's been taken over by this mad ideology. It's a racist ideology, which was inspired by the Nazis. The founding fathers were inspired by the Nazis. You can Google on your phone and you can, the founding fathers, praised the Nazis, racial superiority, hatred towards the Muslims, towards the Christians. And they look back some 1,000 years how Hinduism was the superior religion and culture. And you see, there's a negative nationalism, there's a positive nationalism. You must distinguish between the two. I can inspire my people by saying, look, you were a great nation, let's now get back again. But if I say you were a great nation, but because of these other human communities, you could not reach the top, so shift the hatred towards them, there is always bloodshed.
Prime Minister, I'm sure your counterpart in New Delhi would disagree, but if Prime Minister Modi wants to share his own views, we would be more than happy to travel to New Delhi and interview him on that.
Listen, I would love to debate with Narendra Modi on TV.
I would love
to talk.
But you know, before we organize this debate, and by the way, RT would be happy to moderate it, me personally, but I have an editor
It would be so good for over 1 billion people on the subcontinent if we can resolve our differences through a debate rather than through...
That would be amazing.